Gross, filthy, and disgusting. All words I would use to describe this 1940s Art Deco table fan. It's been neglected for several decades, left to rot in a shed. To be fair, I've had it for about 2 years and have yet to do anything to it, including cleaning it up. But today, it's getting a much needed clean and a bit of new paint. I'm a fan of the Art Deco design, and based on the rubber power cable, I'd say this fan is from the early 40s. It definitely has a real cool industrial design to it. I can only hope we can get it working. I can't even currently test it as the rubber insulation has completely disintegrated, exposing bare wires. The plug is missing a screw and its pins are bent, but it's a nice Bakelite plug, first introduced in Australia in the 1930s. The disintegrated rubber continues, with all of the grommets having melted, some leaving residue everywhere. The first thing to go is that cable. I'll unravel it and chop it off, being sure to save that plug, as we can reuse that. Next is a much needed clean. Taking it outside to do this would have been ideal, but it was pouring rain, so that wasn't happening. To remove all the grime, I'll be using a combination of soap and a sponge, as well as a nylon brush to loosen stubborn pieces. It's already looking better, but there is some pitting to the paint finish. Some may argue this adds character to the item. After all, this fan is about 80 years old. Most videos I've seen on items like this would sandblast or strip away the paint, usually using filler to make it all smooth before repainting. While that makes the item look new and flash, you do lose all of its originality. Taking away the grime, you can see the original finish. It's not quite a mottle grey, but there is some variation to the colour. This is something you would lose if you were to repaint the item. It really is the choice between perfection or character. For this fan, I'm of course going for character, making a functional item that doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I do, however, want it to be clean. The brush wasn't tough enough for some areas, so I had to resort to a fine steel wool to enhance the look. One area I will be painting is the steel guard. There is remnants of grey paint, but it's become mostly just rust. Now that I feel able to handle this fan without gloves, it's time I take a look inside at the electricals. As it turns out, there was some cardboard inside that's gotten wet as a result of cleaning on the outside. I'll have to let this dry out before we reinstall it. The spider inside is not too keen about our restoration efforts. Looking at the wiring, I can see some rubber insulated, but some cotton covered wire as well. I'll continue the disassembly so we can access the motor. 4 screws is all it takes to gain access to the electric motor. It smells as old as it looks. There is some surface rust on the motor and expected grime, but I think it should run. At the rear is real metal gears that drive the oscillating aspect of the fan. Proceeding, I'll attempt to remove the guard. To do that, I first need to remove the blades. The issue is, they're seized. I fear if I pry any harder, I'll break something. So I attempted to remove the guard without removing the blades. I was able to get the guard loose, but there was just no way to get it past the blades. The motor is designed to come apart, but unfortunately this doesn't help us as it comes apart in the wrong direction. This means we're going to have to clean but also paint with this guard in place, certainly complicating this restoration. The last blade was really filthy. This has affected the paint beneath, so it doesn't look as good as the rest after it's been cleaned. With the back done, it's time for the front. Now that it's clean enough to handle, it's time we test it. I'll remove the remainder of the old cable so we can get the new one attached. The active and neutral are attached using nuts, very loosely I might add. This turned out to be a positive as I don't have a socket that fits, as the only sockets I have are in real measurements, none of that imperial garbage, but I was able to free them with my fingers. With the old cable removed, it's time for a repurposed one to go in its place. This one came off my old washing machine. I'll strip each wire and twist them with a pair of pliers before we get them attached into the fan. I do have some reproduction cotton cable, which is a 1-to-1 copy of genuine 30s wiring, but given this only had a black wire to begin with, I decided to replace it with the same style. Plus, I don't want to waste good expensive cable on something of unknown condition. Before we power it up, I will give the motor a bit of a clean, but that's a little hard to do when I can't fully disassemble it. I will attach the screws into the head of the fan to ensure that it doesn't fly to pieces if it does indeed work. As I genuinely didn't know if it was going to go up in smoke, I took it outside and switched it on. At first, it struggled to move, so I helped it along a bit, eventually using an air blower to assist it. But when it was removed, the motor would dramatically slow down until it stopped. Eventually, it worked itself free, and when the air blower was taken away, it kept running, and slowly but surely got faster the longer I left it. After letting it run for about 30 minutes, I was satisfied it was now working and worthy of some paint. I needed to get as much of that surface rust off so I could put a nice coat of grey paint back on. Now is also the time to protect any surfaces I don't want painted. Of course, this whole process would be easier if I could have separated the guard for painting, but I couldn't, so I'll just have to do it like this. Whilst the colour won't be 100%, it will hopefully be close enough that no one will really notice. Once the paint's dried, I can remove all the protective newspaper to reveal our newly painted fan. Of course, not forgetting to put that badge back into place. But we're not done yet. There's still some wiring left to do. I'll replace the cotton wire running to the capacitor and the rubber wire for the power switch. Once that's complete, we can install some new rubber grommets for the wiring to run through. This will prevent the metal from cutting into the wire and also keep the wires snug. There is some melted rubber that will need to come off during this process to make the grommets fit. Now it's time for all those wires to be reattached, making sure to put everything back into the correct spots. The active and neutral connections are housed in small brass fixtures that clamp down on the twisted wire when the nut is attached. As I don't have the correct socket, I'll have to fasten all of these with my pliers. It's really important to ground this fan as it's not double insulated, meaning if a wire was to come loose or something was too short to the middle case, it would become live. The earth connection ensures it can be operated safely. Now all that's left to do is re-grease the gears and bearings in the head of the fan. This is a bit messy, but it's worth the effort. The cover also needs a good clean and grease applied in the appropriate spots. There is one area that has worn as of a lack of grease, so it's a good thing that we've gone ahead and done this. Now we can clean up any excess grease and grime from the inside of the motor head before we reassemble it. Even just spinning the blades with my hand, it's now almost silent. And we're done. So this is it. A gross, rusty, neglected 1940s Elcon fan, preserved and back into working condition after several decades. I'm sure some would have liked to see a full repaint and end up with an immaculate item, but that's not what I wanted. It's not perfect, there's some pitting, some discoloration here and there, but it's clean, original and functional. Though I really should have painted the back pieces of the fan blades that are starting to rust. That is something I overlooked, but something I can do in the future. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the playlist for one-off videos to see more content a little different than usual. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.